In Unit 14, Section B, we will talk about the fraudulent takings type of theft. And here we deal with these two close cousins in terms of fraudulent takings, both fraud and deceit. So let's look at larceny by trick first. Though the possessor voluntarily and knowingly relinquishes it to the accused, consent obtained by reason of a lie or a trick is invalid. So if you con somebody into giving you their property, they give you their property willingly, but you've tricked them into doing it, and that is a form of larceny or larceny by trick. It requires the fraudulent acquisition of possession. And of course, the other elements of larceny must also exist, the ones we covered in Section A. Now, for larceny by trick, acquiring the property is fraudulent if the accused makes a representation of fact which he knows to be false and which is intended to cause another to give up possession of property. And again, add those remaining elements of larceny that we talked about in Section A. The misrepresentation of fact may be related to a present fact, or even to a past fact, or even to a future fact. So any misrepresentation which induces a victim to give up possession is sufficient. Misrepresentation, it must be made for the purpose of inducing a victim to give up possession of property. Acquisition, the crime is not complete unless the victim actually relies on the misrepresentation to give up possession. And possession, if possession is given up but not in reliance of the misrepresentation, the crime would be an attempted larceny by trick, not actual or complete or perfected larceny by trick. We talk about bailments and leases and rentals and the loan of goods, and some of these you should be familiar with from your study of property law. Here's an example. Rago, a car thief, runs up to Mystic. Mystic's sitting in his Audi with the engine running. Rago tells Mystic he's a law enforcement officer and needs to take control of his vehicle. I skeptically ask Rago for identification. He pulls out a phony badge and says, if I don't give up my vehicle, a serial killer is going to get away and he'll kill again. And I grudgingly get out of the car and I let Rago drive off, and he's never seen again. Now, in this example, Rago has obtained the Audi, but I still own the Audi. I still have the ownership documents. They're still in my name. He has possession of the stolen vehicle, but no ownership, no title involvement. And the appropriate offense for this would be larceny by trick. Now, if title is conveyed, we have something else here. So, if the victim intends to convey permanent title, it cannot be larceny by trick, and instead it would fall into the category of false pretenses. That's fraudulent acquisition of title under false pretenses. In Pennsylvania, we would be probably talking about theft by unlawful taking or disposition or theft of services. Those would be companion crimes under the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. So you can take a moment, if you have it, to review the Pennsylvania Crimes Code in the theft chapter in particular. As again, I told you before, you will not be tested on it in the final, but you will be required to understand, to know theft for the bar examination. And attempt is, still a viable alternative. If I were to refuse as the victim to relinquish possession, or I give up possession not because of the misrepresentation, then the crime would be an attempted larceny by trick. Now let's talk for just a moment about false pretenses. This is the other arm of this category of theft. It's the act of convincing someone to voluntarily give you their property by telling them something that isn't true or making a promise that you won't keep. And here are the elements of false pretenses. A fraudulent misrepresentation of a past or present fact which causes the victim to pass title to personal property made with the intent to defraud. False pretenses consist of a fraudulent misrepresentation of a past or present fact. So the representation must actually be false. It's not enough that I think it's false, when in fact it is not, if I am the victim. And if because of a change in circumstances, a representation becomes true by the time I would pass title, there can be no false pretenses. Again, we would be looking at other crimes in the Crimes Code. Keep in mind, for every type of theft, for every change in these facts and these requirements, there is likely a specific code provision in the Pennsylvania Crimes Code to cover it, because that is the way, again, that theft law has evolved. The second element of false pretenses, which causes the victim to pass title, second and third, the representation must cause the victim to give up title in the property, and I must rely on that misrepresentation. The victim must intend to permanently convey title to the property at the time of delivery, and a normal setting for false pretenses is a sale, a trade, or a loan of money in which title actually passes. The fourth element is personal property. Generally speaking, false pretenses relates to the acquisition of tangible personal property that would be the same as we have defined it for larceny purposes generally. And made with the intent to defraud. So the a fraudulent misrepresentation must be made with the intent to defraud. In addition to all the above elements, the prosecutor must prove that the accused had the specific intent to defraud, to acquire property known to be another's with the intent to permanently deprive. In Pennsylvania, if we're looking for a companion crime to larceny by false pretenses, we would look at theft by deception. When you get some time, look at that in the PA Crimes Code. And finally, forgery. It falls into this category. The elements of forgery are the making or altering of a commercial writing with the intent to defraud. That is a common method of obtaining property by false pretenses using a false or a forged instrument. So that's it for this second section, for section B of theft, and we will move on to the final section in section C.